Despite this kit being shorter than the real great Nu Gundam, everything else about it is a step up compared to its animated counterpart, placing it higher up than the Nu Gundam as the better real great kit, living up to its name. この Hi-Nu Gundam は伊達じゃない! What is going on, guys? MJ2005 Gundam here, and today I'm going to be reviewing the real great Hi-Nu Gundam from Mobile Suit Gundam Char's Counterattack, Beltorchika's Children. The Nu Gundam from another universal century, clearly doubling down on the part where it's not just for show. This kit comes in a total of 14 runners with a rather small decal sheet, with all plates but the B and SB13 plates having undergated parts. Contrary to popular belief, only the frame and undersides of the funnels are reused from the real great Nu. Everything else is unique to this kit. Because of that, the build remains mostly fresh, and due to the high parts count, special finished plastics, heavy use of undergating, and condensed instructions in certain panels of the manual, it is a build aimed towards more seasoned builders, and ill-advised for beginners to attempt this build without some prior experience. After a lengthy snap build with panel lining and decal application, and don't mind the stand, I'll explain in the articulation section, the real great Hi-Nu Gundam is mesmerizing to look at, almost hypnotically beautiful. Color separation is heavily used from the cutout windows all over the body for the vents and grade details, to the smaller details like the vents on the shoulders and calves, to the crotch V, and color gradient effects on the fin funnels, which I wasn't a fan of until this came around, to interpret this design at its absolute best. Bandai isn't messing around when it comes to its presentation. Unfortunate to some, this kit does not have the two-tone based color treatment, but to me, the silver and copper editions break the color scheme up sufficiently, so the lack of two-tone colors don't bother me all that much. Bandai didn't stop there though, as parts we rarely pay attention to also has some detail, like the insides of the shoulder armor, the strap races underneath the front and back skirts, and the piping and mechanical details encased within, and even the mechanical detail revealed upon bending the knee. I couldn't think of a spot where Bandai hasn't implemented details onto. All the decals are obviously stickers, but the default stickers involve the eyes, rear head camera, and the silver ones on the shoulder, torso, waist, and feet joints. Proportions and detailing are not an exact replica of the illustrations due to the real great design liberties, but in fact a bit of the original design, 2007 redesign, and Katoki's designs for the Master Grade, with the upper body including the backpack taken from the original design, while the legs and overall color scheme taken from the redesign, and the skirts taken from the Katoki design. They did throw in some original elements as well, like the shrunken head crest, elongated V-fin and deeper cuts on the cheek, narrower waist, small side skirt thrusters, enlarged calves and added braces, copper joints and vent details, and some extra silver details to break up the white even further. Both the copper and the silvers are expectedly the metallic injection colors that Bandai uses, so the tones may not be to everyone's taste. Undeniably though, the darkened spot from cleaning up nutbox are a bit annoying. I'm not a fan of the anorectically narrow waists, but everything else enhances the design, especially the copper and silver, which gives it the extra pop from the unique and dull on paper color scheme. Although I will say I'm a little disappointed that there's no engraving on the head crest like those on the high-grade Universal Century kit. It's just a minor gripe rather than a real critique. Little extra attention is needed on top of what's already there, but I would highly recommend applying the decals or the water slides coming out in December, highlighting the triple mouth vents, and maybe a matte top coat to push the visuals even further. Otherwise, I'm perfectly satisfied displaying it after a straight build. Standing at 16 cm to the top of the head, it's much taller than the high grade's 13.8 cm, but still shorter than the real great Nu's 17 cm. Surprisingly, it doesn't look minuscule when compared to the Nightingale, but of course subsequently being eaten up by the wingspan. But even without its arch nemesis, the real great Hi-Nu Gundam can draw attention with its wings on top of its sculpt and unconventional color scheme. For articulation, the head is on a double ball joint, so you can't do the funky chicken, and things are already getting interesting with the head flap in the back over here. So you can move that out of the way, to allow for the head to go up further than it would. Now couple it with a collar joint, and you can allow the head to go very far up. That's a lot of movement right there. Going down, it's pretty decent, side to side pretty decent, and thanks to the movable head flap, you can allow the head to steer clear of the collar and perform a full 360 rotation. That is very nice right there. Moving on to the shoulders, over here you can tug out the joint from the torso. It's on a double joint inside, and you can swivel it out a fairly decent amount. You can also perform a 90-degree raise, which is absolutely fantastic. The arms themselves, they can rotate all the way around very swiftly, not too tight for its own good. The arms can swivel out basically perpendicular, so couple it with the tucked out joint, you can go for a very high arm raise to call the teacher very easily. There is a rotation above the elbow, and a double jointed elbow, which bends very far, and a rotation in the forearm. Same things do go for the right arm, so despite the arms being different in design, they share the same points and degrees of articulation. And I put these hands on for a reason, because these are the normal holding hands and you do have a knuckle joint over here. And of course, the right arm does have a wrist joint to allow for the barrel to come out, which I would explain further later on. But the knuckle joint over here is definitely what I would not have expected. Now, as for the open hands, you do also have a folding knuckle joint, which is very, very nice. You can absolutely go for some kung fu poses if you so desire. Now, the waist over here is on a double joint. Now, just like the Nu Gundam, the double joint is collapsed into the abdomen, so as to compensate for the weight issues in terms of the waist structure. Now, because of that, you can go for very insane back crunches for crunches. Side to side crunches are not that prevalent here, and you do have a full peg waist rotation, which is very nice. Now, moving on to the unconventional skirts, you can still perform the usual movements. All 6 skirts do move, not 90 degrees though, unfortunately, because of the very bulky design. But the front skirts and side skirts are jointed together, so you can swivel them out of the way gingerly and allow them to fully move. Now, the legs over here, you do have a locking panel from here, so you can unlock it to allow for the legs to move individually, and you lock it back in once you decided that you're done. And flip out the crotch piece and completely unlock the rear, and you can tug the waist up before locking it back in, just for more of an inclination in the waist joint, kind of similar to the Eclipse Gundam, but a lot more sophisticated. As for the legs, they can go for a full forward kick as a maximum degree of movement with all the skirts out of the way, moving back a very decent amount, and going out to the side basically the full splits because of the gap the skirts created by moving out of the way. You do also have a thigh swivel and a triple jointed knee, starting off with the thigh armor separation, then the knee armor separation on the second with piston movement. If you look closely, you can see the piston in there actually moving, although the piston itself is very hard to see, and the third joint down here completing the full bend. It's mesmerizing to look at, fascinating to see how it comes together, and the great degree of movement is basically just the tip of the iceberg of how amazing this leg is. There is the armor panel opening gimmick I will touch on in a bit, and as for the feet, you can move it forward and back, a little bit of an ankle rocker, and a little bit of rotation up top, but you can also tug the feet out to perform the Michael Jackson lean. Not only that, the toes can move very far forwards. That is an insane amount of toe articulation, but that doesn't affect the basic ground balance, without the backpack at least, because the lowest position the toes can go is completely flush with the ground, so there is no struggle to get it perfect to allow it to stand on the ground, like I said, without the backpack. And if you want the toes to point down for aerial poses, I suppose it is possible by utilizing the ankle joints. Moving on to the backpack now, taken off just for clearance, starting with the tail fin, which has a hinge at the base and a hinge at the tip over here. This armor flap can move to unlock the retraction mechanic, which will be explained later on in the gimmick section. Now, the binders over here can move forward and back, up and down, and rotate to a certain degree. And the cups that hold the fin funnels can move individually. But one fascinating thing about the outermost funnel is this. The thruster over here moves in tandem just because of one small piece connecting the two mechanics together. That is absolutely fascinating. Now the fuel tanks over here, they are on a hinge at the base of the backpack. And you do also have a ball joint that you can lock by pushing the fuel tank in. And it does kind of go loose if you're uncoupling it, but it isn't really intended to be uncoupled. Now a lot of you guys have been asking about ground balance, and because of the weight of the backpack, it's nigh on impossible to get it to stand on the ground. Now you can tinker around with the joints just to get into that one sweet spot like I just did here, but first it basically just looks like it has a bad back, and if you wanted to have a straight back, more often than not, it will just topple over. Articulation of this kit is exceptional with easy movement and plenty of beautiful mechanics to feast your eyes upon. I especially love the extra mechanics like the head flap and double hinge skirts to make way for even more movement. Near impossibility of standing aside, its structure is perfectly capable in handling its own weight, and a shake test dictates that everything on this kit is sturdy. For gimmicks, the chest piece is on a double hinge, which can swing up to open the cockpit. Alternatively, you can slide the blue hatch up to open it as well. Unfortunately, it seems like Bandai is discontinuing the small pilot figures as there isn't one for Amuro included in this kit. You can also open the shoulder panel, tuck out their ends, open the blue panels of the back skirts, and open up the calf armor panels to deploy all verniers on the body for more mobility, a feature taken from the Master Grade version car kit. While this kit doesn't come with the exact stabilizer of the redesigned version, you can retract the tail fin and flip up the tip to make it look like the redesigned stabilizer, which is an original feature to this kit. It's a subtle change, but it does strengthen the Hi-Nu's presence with all the flared out panels. And since this kit has terrible ground balance, you can remove the backpack and plug on the custom adapter before reattaching the former and sticking an Ashen Base 5 into the adapter to prop the kit up. Sadly, this kit doesn't include an Ashen Base, so you'd have to purchase it separately. Moving on to accessories, you get a pair of fists, holding hands, open hands, and a right trigger finger hand, each with their own hand covers, but only the holding and open hands have knuckle joints. For weapons then, we begin with the beam gun on the forearm. It's not much, but you can extend the barrel by bending the wrist down to make it more visible. While it doesn't have the ammo clip from the redesign, I like how it's linked to the wrist joint for easier deployment. Secondly, we have the beam sabers, and we have 3 of them, 2 of which stored in the funnel binders with a panel you can tug out and open up for retrieval, and a third stored in the left forearm, which can be accessed by opening up the front and white panels of the left arm. The backup saber can barely function as a hand-free beam saber like the version Ka, and it does have different surface detail compared to the main sabers. Really strong attention to detail there. Stick the included SB13 beams into the hilts and plug them into the holding hands for use. Sadly, they're all standard type beam sabers as opposed to having 2 double-sided beam sabers and 1 standard as spare. But this is taken from the Master Grade version Ka, as from what I'm told, the Hi-Nu had always had double-sided beam sabers since its conception in 1990 until Katoki stepped in. I apologize if I'm incorrect though, even after intensive research, and if so, please do educate me in the comments. Unfortunately, despite the beams sharing the same alluring shade of blue as those for the real grade perfectibility, the Hi-Nu's beams don't glow under UV light. A slight bit of disappointment, but a very minor one at that. And in case you're wondering, they're too large for the beam gun barrel, so you cannot really replicate the effect that the Master Grade version Ka has. Up next, we have the beam rifle. Everything you see is color separated plastic, though the silver pieces do have some atrocious nubs. Strangely enough, they redesigned the rifle based on the B Club Hi-Nu Gundam resin kit, and it looks sleeker and less blocky compared to the high grade version, which is retroactively every other interpretation of the rifle. Just peg the rifle into the trigger finger hand for a secure grip during usage, and the redesign allows it to fit in with the Hi-Nu's design a lot better as it feels less like an afterthought. You can store the rifle by flipping out the peg on its side, lowering the basket panel, and plugging it in for a secure connection in case you don't want to use it. Moving on, we have the Nu Hyper Bazooka. It is fully color separated, and the design remained relatively the same as the high grade apart from the silver rear end with triangle details, which does have horrendous nut marks due to the silver finish. There is a movable handle and an extendable barrel, and it can be plugged onto the holding hands for a solid grip during usage. It can be also securely stored in the backpack by clipping the stock onto the retractable clip. Next up, we have the shield. It takes from the pattern of the redesigned version, and all the colors are separated plastic pieces. The light blue details are a little unnecessary to me, but I will attest to Bandai's engineering prowess by implementing them using separate plastic pieces. The underside takes from the original version though, as instead of a blank panel, it does have a beam cannon barrel and 4 missiles. You can plug it onto the left arm only and adjust it with the ball joint connection, and it is solid as a rock. Finally, we have the fin funnels. They are held on by cups on the backpack, and I cannot reiterate enough how nice they look with the plastic color gradients they gave it. Otherwise, the fins can fold out for deployment, and all 6 are functional. If you want to display them away from the Hi-Nu Gundam, you can purchase the figurized jet effects and plug the cross-shaped peg onto the holes at the ends of the funnels. Granted, the yellow effects don't suit them the best, but it still works if you have enough effect parts to send them all out. Leftovers only include the original rear panels of the Nu Gundam's funnels, and while they're obsolete in this kit, they're pretty easy to ignore due to the low number. In regards to interchangeability between the real grade Nu, only the heads are safely and solidly interchangeable. The shoulder holes of the Hi-Nu are too small for the Nu. The waists could technically be swapped, but still rather risky as the pegs are of different sizes. The legs of the Hi-Nu stress the holes of the Nu, and the Hi-Nu's backpack peg is too small to stay on the Nu's back. All of that and vice versa. Not even the funnels are interchangeable, as despite having the same length from sharing the structure, the Hi-Nu's funnels filled up the slots that were for the connecting pieces of the Nu. And because the former is minutely thicker than the latter to fit into the cups of the binders, the Nu's funnels will have trouble staying solidly on. Hence the two are not made for bashing with each other. As for the equipment of the heavy weapon system, the shape of the chest and skirt armor pieces aren't made for the Hi-Nu, and while it seems promising for the leg armor, when you remove the side panels, the calves are just too large for the leg pieces. The shield is too thick for the Hyper Mega Shield extension, but you can allow the Hi-Nu Gundam to hold the Hyper Mega Rifle, making it the only thing from the Nu Gundam's heavy weapon system to be compatible with the Hi-Nu Gundam. However, with the removed leg panels, and reference to how simple it is to equip the Master Grade version Ka with its heavy weapon system parts, there is a high possibility for a real grade Hi-Nu heavy weapon system expansion in the future. To conclude, I am lost for words when it comes to its looks. Despite it not using a two-tone base color, it looks absolutely stunning. Color separation is top-notch, surface detail is sufficient enough to sophisticate the looks while not seeming too busy, the separable armor pieces produce a mesmeric result, and the mix of all worlds is executed perfectly. Though the small waist is a little bit questionable, it's barely noticeable and doesn't detract from what's already there. The visible knobs on the silver pieces are a bit of an eyesore though. Overall, the biggest weakness of the handling is the nigh-on impossibility of balancing it on the ground, but an action-based 5 can solve that problem. Other than that, nothing on this kit is loose or prone to falling off, while the kit is just easily movable enough to not induce paranoia during posing. Like I said at the beginning, this kit is not meant for beginners due to the parts count and heavy use of undergates. Nothing wrong with that. What this lengthy and mostly fresh build provides is sophistication that pays off well in the form of beautiful mechanics, mostly hidden nut marks, and a fun experience in not just building and touching it up, but to see the mechanics come together as well. Being priced at 4,500 yen without tax, personally, this kit doesn't feel that price, but beyond it. From the surface aesthetics to the internal mechanics, Bandai has really outdone themselves in order to provide us with not only a best of multiple worlds, but the best model kit interpretation of the Hi-Nu Gundam with everything at their disposal. Sure, it may not have mini Amuro, and that some parts from the Nu are left over, but personally, I'd say the asking price is more than worth it for a technological and visual marvel such as this. Overall, it averages a 9.75 out of 10, and it is damn near perfection if the nubs on the ranged weapons and some of the silver pieces are hidden better. It may not be the most faithful Hi-Nu Gundam interpretation, but it's definitely the best one in terms of the engineering, completely putting into practice that the Nu Gundam isn't just for show. Just make sure you're ready to take on the building challenges if you're a beginner looking into this kit, and prepare for the eternal war that is which Hi-Nu Gundam is the best interpretation with this thrown into the mix. So that wraps it up for this review. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you did like it, please be sure to drop a like, comment, and also subscribe for more Gunpla reviews, Gunpla news, and all that kind of stuff. Turn on notifications for future content alerts if you haven't, and I'll see you all in the next video. Hang loose and peace out.